Sometimes the biggest stories come from the smallest places. What if I told you that one single village could teach us pretty much everything we need to know about modern farming? The good, the bad, and the complicated. Well, today we're heading to that village. It's called Palampur.
So, here it is, Palampur. At first glance, yeah, it just looks like a bunch of fields, right? A simple patchwork. But what you're actually looking at is a story. It's a story of a massive problem, a really clever solution, and, well, a whole lot of consequences. It's a revolution that happened right here, on this very land.
All right, so to really get our heads around Palampur's story, we're going to break it down. We'll start with the huge problem they were facing. Then we'll look at the brilliant way they tried to solve it. After that, we'll dig into the hidden costs of that solution. And finally, we'll ask a tough question. Who really won in the end?
So, first things first. Our story starts with a problem. And it's a big one, a fundamental one. It shapes absolutely everything in Palampur. It's the simple fact that you can't make more land.
And why is that such a massive deal here? Well, look at this number, 75%. That means 3 out of every 4 people who work in Palampur, they're in farming. Their entire life, their family's well-being, it all comes down to what they can get out of that one fixed piece of land.
Okay, and check this out. The year 1960 is super important here. By that point, the people in Palampur had done everything they could. They'd turned every last bit of wasteland into farmland. So since 1960, the amount of farmable land hasn't grown by a single inch. It's been completely static. There's literally nowhere else to go.
Just so we're all on the same page, when we talk about how much land we're dealing with, the standard unit is a hectare. Just picture a square that's 100 meters by 100 meters. Now, if you were actually in the village, you'd probably hear people talking about Bighas or Quintas. But for our purposes, let's just stick with hectares to keep it simple.
Okay, so if you can't grow outwards, what's the only other option? You have to grow up. You have to get smarter. And that is precisely what happened in Palampur. The farmers got incredibly resourceful and figured out how to squeeze more and more out of the very same plots of land.
And their first big idea was something called multiple cropping. The concept is, well, it's just brilliant in its simplicity. The idea is never let the land take a break. Instead of just getting 1 crop per year, why not 2, or even 3? You make that same piece of dirt work for you all year round.
And here's what that looks like in practice. It's like a perfectly timed dance. During the rainy season, or Kharif, they grow jawar and bajra. That's mostly for cattle feed. Then, bam, October to December hits, and it's time for potatoes. After that, in the winter, the rabi season, they plant wheat, some for themselves, some to sell. And hey, on some fields, they even have sugarcane growing all year. This whole non-stop cycle was only possible because Palampur was ahead of the curve. They got electricity early on, which meant they could power some really effective irrigation.
That irrigation point brings us to the second and arguably even bigger innovation. They went all in on modern farming. It was a complete overhaul. Think of it like this. They threw out the old playbook and got a new one. Instead of traditional seeds, they started using high-yielding variety seeds, HYVs for short, which are basically seeds engineered to produce way more grain. They switched from natural manure to chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And those old-school Persian wheels for water? Gone, replaced by powerful electric tube wells.
So, did all this new tech actually work? Let's look at the numbers. Using the old ways, a farmer in Palampur would get about 1,300 kilograms of wheat from 1 hectare of land. Okay, 1,300. Burn that number into your brain for a second.
Now look at this. With the modern toolkit, the HYV seeds, the chemicals, the water on demand, that number jumped to 3,200 kilograms per hectare. It's skyrocketed. We're talking more than double the amount of food from the exact same piece of land. On paper, this was a mind-blowing success.
And this really pulls it all together. It shows you it wasn't just one magic bullet. It was the whole package. It was the special seeds, plus the constant water from irrigation, plus the chemical fertilizers, plus the modern machinery. You needed all of it working together in a system to get that incredible jump in how much you could grow.
But you knew there was a but coming, right? This incredible story of success had a flip side, a shadow. The Green Revolution produced a ton of food for sure, but it came with a cost. And this wasn't a cost you could measure in rupees. It was a debt owed to nature itself.
And this is where the story gets really complicated. We have to stop and ask the tough question. What was the real price of all this progress? What did this new intensive way of farming do to the very land and water that made it all possible in the first place? Well, the bill came due and it had 3 big items on it.
First, all those chemical fertilizers started to strip the soil of its natural fertility. Second, the tube wells were constantly pumping, and the groundwater level, the water table, started to drop, a lot. And third, you get into this dangerous cycle. We've seen it in places like Punjab, where farmers now have to use even more chemicals and more water just to get the same results as before. It's getting more and more expensive just to stand still.
And this isn't just some theory, you know? This is the science. That quote tells you exactly what's going on. The chemical fertilizers are like a bomb for the soil's ecosystem. They kill off all the good bacteria and tiny organisms that naturally keep it healthy and fertile. So over time, the soil gets weaker and weaker, and you become completely dependent on more and more artificial chemicals. It's a trap. And the problems weren't just in the soil and the water. They were social, too. This agricultural boom created a lot of wealth, no doubt about it. But the big question is, where did all that wealth go? Was everyone getting a piece of the pie? To answer that, we need to look at the people of Palampur.
This chart, wow, it says it all really. In Palampur, there are 450 families. A full third of them, 150 families, own no land at all. None. Then you have another 240 families, that's more than half the village, who are small farmers. They're working with tiny little plots, less than 2 hectares. That means just 60 families, a tiny minority, are the medium and large farmers who own and control most of the land.
Now, to put a human face on these numbers, let's talk about one guy, Gobind. Gobind was one of those small farmers. He had a farm of 2.25 hectares. It wasn't big, but with hard work, he made it work. He could support his family on it.
But here's where we see a problem that happens over and over again, not just in Palampur, but all over. When Gobind died, his farm wasn't passed on to one person. Following tradition, it was split up, divided equally among his 3 sons.
And what's the result of that? Well, you do the math. Each son ended up with a tiny plot of just 3/4 of a hectare. And a piece of land that small, it's just not enough to make a living on, not even with all the modern farming tricks. So now, they have to find other work just to get by, stuck with these little plots that get smaller with every generation.
So let's go back to that first image we saw of Palampur. When you look at it now, with everything we know, you don't just see fields anymore, do you? You see Gobind's story, multiplied over and over. You can literally see the inequality carved into the earth, all those tiny, scattered plots belonging to the small farmers, right next to the huge, open fields of the wealthy few. It's a map of their society.
And that's where the story of Palampur leaves us. It's a story that starts in one village, but ends with a question for the entire planet. The very things that helped them grow more food also damaged their land and made the gap between rich and poor even wider. So the challenge they faced is the one we all face. How do we feed everyone on this planet without wrecking it in the process, and without forgetting the very people who grow our food?